So this whole Alec Baldwin trial thing is going on right now, and it's about that shooting that happened on the set of his movie Rust back in 2021, where the cinematographer Helena Hutchins died. Baldwin's facing involuntary manslaughter charges, and he's saying that he is not guilty. They picked the jury earlier this week, and now they're getting into the meat of it. He could end up in prison for up to 18 months if they find him guilty, but he's not locked up or anything right now. His lawyer is saying that it was a tragic accident, but that he didn't do anything criminal. He's arguing that Baldwin was just an actor doing his job, using a prop that was part of his costume. The lawyers are pointing fingers at the armorer and the assistant director, saying that they are the ones who mess up with the gun safety. But on the other hand, the prosecutor is saying that Baldwin was playing around with a real gun and broke basic safety rules. They were rehearsing a scene and Baldwin was pointing a gun at the cinematographer when it went off. She died and the director got hurt as well. It was a big deal because nothing like that had happened on a movie set in decades. And Baldwin says he pulled back the hammer but didn't pull the trigger. The prosecutors are blaming both the armorer, who was pretty young and inexperienced, and Baldwin for not being careful enough. It is a mess, really. They're trying to figure out who's responsible for Hutchins' death. And it looks like it might come down to whether they think Baldwin should have been more careful with the gun, even if he thought that it was just a prop. I already made a long video analysis on this interview about his case, and at the end of this video, I'm going to summarize what could have been the greatest mistake and how this tragedy would have been prevented. Okay, so let's talk about Alec Baldwin's general body language. I noticed that he had tried at least to not bring too much attention to himself, although there are signals, of course, not only on his facial expressions, but in some attitudes that he has with his posture that are just signature about him. It's like when you have a body language baseline and you already had a celebrity brand or a personal brand, it's hard to separate both things regardless of the circumstances. And you're looking at the person whether they are filming a movie or walking down the street or on a criminal trial. It's going to be a bit difficult to separate both of them. So the first thing that I have to mention is, in this first clip, are two things. First, that he's playing what is called the nerd defense. Now, I don't know how much Alec Baldwin needs to be wearing those glasses, but that is a classic strategy on any trial. Your attorney will tell you to wear glasses to the trial even if you don't need them. And you might ask why. Because you want to look like a nerd, because nerds are usually thought of as inoffensive, as someone that couldn't harm a fly or whatever, just like Ed Kemper, I guess. But well, in this case, he's wearing glasses. I really don't know if he needs them. I have my doubts that wearing glasses, that the frame is transparent red would be a good idea. They look a lot like blood. They should have been like neutral black or maybe blue, but no, red was not the right call. Another thing is Alec Baldwin's natural smug resting face or resting smug face, whatever you want to call it. This is something that is part of his body language baseline. Like when you look at the physiognomy of someone over the years, it happens a lot that their facial expressions begin to model the shape of their faces. And it also comes down to facial expressions. And we could say that he had always had that bit of a smug face and that has worked well for him for some of his roles. But at the same time, it doesn't help when you are in a criminal trial and you're trying to project some empathy, because that is what you want to project in these circumstances. But again, that is part of Alec Baldwin's usual body language or his usual facial expression. And it's hard to separate that from the person himself. A commentary before we move on is that his brother Steven looked really worried right there in the back. He was really serious. I don't know, for example, if this mouth is usually like this, his mouth, his lip corners pull downwards, which again also makes him look like a resting smug face, and he also looks a bit puffy, and his eyes look smaller than I remember, but what I can tell from this is that he is worried for his brother. And speaking of who was attending that first day of trial, there was also Hilaria as well. and she was really tense. And at times you can see that her head and her neck were really tense, really sitting straight. Her jaw was clenched and looking straight forward. I mean, of course, this has to be a tense situation. Seeing your husband, this risk of being sent to jail for 18 months, regardless of what are the odds of your case, that must be stressing and that must be worrying. And in that regard, we saw very few pacifying gestures from Alec Baldwin throughout this first day of trial. The pacifying gestures in the sense of you touch your face or maybe cover your mouth or maybe you do something to try to calm yourself down. Most of the time, he was trying to just not have any strong facial expressions, not show any emotions, and I'm pretty sure that he was told this by his attorneys. You have to be as neutral as possible, regardless of what is going to happen during the trial. This is very important, and this is going to be critical in a minute. Even so, there are moments like this one when the prosecution was trying to prove that the gun involved in this tragedy was working perfectly when it was tested. I mean, maybe the defense was trying to argue that the gun had some kind of malfunction, which the prosecution was proving wrong at that time, and Baldwin made sure to just look away, do not stare at all in the direction of the prosecution. In my opinion, this is not a good look, because this looks like the defense made a mistake, and he's trying to avoid that mistake that his attorneys made. Because if you are comfortable and confident that your attorneys did the right thing, then there's no reason why you have to look away. Now, when his attorneys were speaking, it was a completely different story in terms of body language. He was looking much more confident. He was looking straight at his attorney. He had his chin a bit up, which is confidence. I would say that he was looking much more confident. The problem is that with Baldwin's smug face, it's too easy to look arrogant. I think the right call in this case would have been to have the exact same body language regardless of who was testifying or the witness, who was the witness from the prosecution or the defense. The idea is the more neutral that you look, the better it will be to prove your innocence. Like you are confident that you did nothing wrong. Now, hands down, the most critical part in terms of body language is when they were showing the footage, the body cam footage of the first responders after the incident, especially the footage that shows the paramedics treating Hutchins. I am not going to show the footage because it's quite distressing, and you can see the faces of everyone in there who were truly distressed due to what they were watching, because Hutchins was alive and moving at that time. But what caught my attention is that Alec Baldwin, at that exact moment, was the most neutral and emotionless possible. I think he knew that was a very critical moment, and he had to show absolutely zero emotion. You can even see that Hilaria in the background was really distressed about what was going on. So, in general terms, what pertains to Alec Baldwin's body language, he has tried to control himself. He has tried to be neutral with his emotions, but it hasn't worked that well. I think he could have done a better job being more neutral, no matter who was the witness in the stand, no matter if it was the prosecution or the defense speaking at any given moment. Now, I'm not saying that this is a coincidence, but I think that it's a nice coincidence that 1 month ago, Alec and Hilaria Baldwin released a trailer for a reality show that is going to be premiered in 2025. That's a bit of anticipation, right? Like so many people must be eager to watch what is going on with these two at home. Well, it made sure to present Baldwin in a fatherly role with all his children. I really lost count of them by this point. But this is pretty much like the nerd defense, only that the timing of this trailer and how public was in nature, it was meant to sway the public opinion about him. I mean, I don't know how many people actually like the guy, but for a lot of people, the concept of family and being able to be there for your children, that's a big deal. So, obviously, this was done keeping that in mind and to have fresh scenes of all his children hugging him whenever he was going to be mentioned in the media because of this trial. I don't know, but In regards to Baldwin as a father figure, I can't help but remember that time he called his daughter a thoughtless little pig on a leaked voice mail. I'm sure those family reunions are just the best. But I think he genuinely wishes that we forgot about that kind of things. And by the way, this is a photo from the first day of the trial, and this is the kind of body language pacifiers that I mentioned when you are frustrated and try to vent some of that emotion. Also, this must be the expression that Baldwin does when Hilaria insists on doing yoga on those first-class commercial flights. But well, so is life. But now I want to talk about how the accident actually happened, and I want to refer to the gun itself. In the context of firearms, particularly revolvers like the one Alec Baldwin was handling, the hammer is a critical component of the firing mechanism. The hammer is a piece that, when cocked back, is held under tension. When the trigger is pulled, the hammer is released, striking the firing pin, which then hits the primer of the cartridge, igniting the gunpowder and firing the bullet. Cocking the hammer can be done manually, what is called single action, like when you see in westerns when they cock the hammer with the thumb.
You have to cock the hammer, son.
In single action mode, pulling the hammer back locks it into a fully cocked position, ready to be released by the trigger. Many revolvers have safety mechanisms to prevent accidental discharge if the hammer is not fully cocked or if the gun is dropped. This is going to be important in a minute. When Baldwin mentioned that he cocked the hammer but did not pull the trigger, he was pulling it back in that single action motion with his thumb. But if the hammer is pulled back but not fully cocked, not locked into the final position, it is held under tension just by your thumb. Now, when you ask, why would he be pointing right at the camera, being the director and the cinematographer right in front of you? Most likely when they were setting a follow focus shot in which the gun is pointing straight at the camera, and you first have the barrel on focus and then change the focus to the character, in this case Baldwin. One of the best examples of a follow focus shot with guns pointing directly at the camera is the final scene of Die Hard when Sergeant Alec Powell shoots Carl. This kind of shoots, pun intended, are used to emphasize a strong emotion within the scene. Maybe that the character is finally getting their vengeance, or in the case of Al Powell, he finally could use his gun again after an accident many years ago. And regarding why there were live bullets or real bullets during the filming, well, you sometimes need them because maybe one shot requires that you see bullets piercing through a wooden door or hitting a tree or being shot at the ground, and you need live, real bullets so they act like real ammunition in those instances. Of course, it is the responsibility of the armorer to have them locked up and be sure which kind of bullets are used in which scenes. In the case of a shot like the one I was describing, there was zero need for any kind of bullet to be in the chambers of the revolver. It could be literally empty because from up front it would make zero difference. The controversial question here is, it was not Baldwin's direct responsibility to handle the guns on set. He is an actor. His job is acting. But for this kind of guns, checking himself if it was actually empty would have prevented this tragedy.
And more importantly, how to check if it's loaded.
Basically, you have to open the gate, go to half cock, and then you can turn it, and what you see is the base of the round.
To check each of the 6 chambers, it takes less than a minute.
Now, if the thumb slips or the hammer is released suddenly without being fully cocked, it can snap forward, striking the firing pin with enough force to ignite the primer of the cartridge, causing the gun to fire. So my theory is that Baldwin might have pulled the hammer back partially, intending to show the cinematographer the action without fully cocking it. This is a normal procedure in filming because maybe they needed to set up the shot, so maybe the gun itself didn't get in the way of seeing Baldwin's thumb, getting in the correct lighting and contrast, because as I told you, this must have been like the climax of the plot. If his thumb slipped or he released the hammer suddenly, the hammer would move forward rapidly. But there's another thing, and I mentioned that this kind of revolvers have a safety mechanism that is the half-cock position, in which the hammer is locked halfway through, and that position prevents accidental discharge. In fact, that half-cocked position prevents exactly the kind of accidents that if your thumb slips or you let go of the hammer quickly, it will not hit the firing pin. It will be stopped by the half-cock position. But guess what? It so happens that by some reason I can't wrap my head around this particular gun that Baldwin was holding in his hand. It looks like the half-cock pin had been removed, which means that there was no safety mechanism to prevent the hammer from hitting the firing pin with full force if his thumb slipped. Why would they need such a modification for the scene? I don't know. But if there is live ammunition on set, and you're dealing with guns which have been modified to get rid of their safety mechanisms, well, you are looking for trouble. But I would love to know what you think about this in the comments. Don't forget to download my free 100 body language tips in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy. Much love and bliss.